The fall of the Berlin Wall was one of the most significant events in modern history. It marked the end of the Cold War and the reunification of Germany. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the history of the wall, how it came to fall, and the impact it had on the world. The construction of the Berlin Wall. The purpose of the wall was to prevent East Germans from fleeing to the West. The building of the wall was a response to a mass exodus of East Germans to the West in the early 1960s, which was causing serious problems for the East German economy and political system. The wall was made of concrete and steel, and it was heavily fortified with guard towers, barbed wire, and other security measures. It extended for over 100 miles, encircling West Berlin and separating it from the rest of East Germany. The wall was not just a physical barrier, but also a psychological one, as it symbolized the division between democracy and communism, and between freedom and repression. The construction of the wall was met with international condemnation, and many people in the West saw it as a sign of Soviet aggression and an attack on freedom and democracy. However, the East German government defended the wall as a necessary measure to prevent Western interference and subversion. The wall also became a powerful symbol of the Cold War. Over the years, the wall was expanded, reinforced, and made increasingly sophisticated, including guard towers, minefields, and anti-vehicle trenches, making it one of the most heavily fortified barriers in history. The beginning of change. In the late 1980s, the Soviet Union was experiencing significant political and economic difficulties, including a stagnant economy and growing unrest among its citizens. These problems were compounded by the rise of a new generation of Soviet leaders who were more open to reform and greater political freedoms. In Eastern Europe, this new openness led to growing demands for change, particularly in East Germany, where the communist government had maintained a tight grip on power since the end of World War II. Dissent and protest were growing, as people became increasingly frustrated with the government's policies, including its attempts to restrict travel and freedom of expression. In September 1989, Hungary opened its border with Austria, allowing thousands of East Germans to escape to the West. This event was a turning point in the movement for change, as it demonstrated that the communist government was losing control and that change was possible. The news spread quickly, and protests erupted across East Germany, with demonstrators calling for greater political freedoms and an end to the communist government. The government responded by sending the police and the military to try to quell the protests, but this only served to galvanize the movement further. As the protests grew in size and intensity, the government was forced to make concessions, including the resignation of the longtime leader of East Germany, Erich Honecker. The fall of the wall. On November 9, 1989, the East German government made an announcement that would change the course of history. Its citizens could now travel to the West without restriction. This announcement came after weeks of protests and demonstrations throughout East Germany, with citizens demanding greater political freedom and economic opportunity. The announcement took many by surprise, including the East German border guards who were manning the checkpoints at the Berlin Wall. As the news spread, a large crowd of East Berliners began to gather at the checkpoints, demanding to be let through. Eventually, the guards relented, and the crowd surged through the checkpoints and into West Berlin. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a momentous occasion, marking the end of decades of division and hostility between East and West. It was also a powerful symbol of the triumph of freedom and democracy over authoritarianism and repression. The dismantling of the wall began soon after, with people chipping away at the concrete and tearing down the barriers that had separated them for so long. In the weeks and months that followed, the world watched as Germany took the first steps towards reunification, with East and West coming together to form a single, democratic nation. The role of people. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a remarkable event in human history, and it would not have been possible without the determination and bravery of people on both sides of the wall. In the years leading up to the fall, people in East Germany had become increasingly frustrated with the oppressive policies of the communist regime. There were protests and demonstrations throughout the country, and people began to demand greater freedom and more democratic rights. Many East Germans risked their lives to try to cross the wall, and many lost their lives in the attempt. However, their persistence and determination helped to create an atmosphere of change that eventually led to the fall of the wall. When the East German government announced that its citizens could travel to the West without restriction, people from both sides of the wall worked together to dismantle it. Crowds gathered on both sides of the wall, and people began chipping away at it with hammers and chisels. The scene was joyous and celebratory, with people singing, dancing, and embracing each other. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a testament to the power of people to bring about change, and it inspired similar movements around the world. The end of the Cold War. The fall of the Berlin Wall marked the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a new era in global politics. The division of Europe, which began after World War II, was finally coming to the end. The Soviet Union, which had been the dominant force in Eastern Europe, was rapidly losing its power, and the fall of the Berlin Wall was a clear indication of this. The reunification of Germany was one of the most significant outcomes of the fall of the Berlin Wall. East and West Germany were reunited on October 3, 1990, and this marked the beginning of a new, unified Germany. The end of the Cold War also led to the dissolution of the Soviet Union, which formally came to an end on December 26, 1991. The fall of the Berlin Wall paved the way for a new era of cooperation and partnership between the former adversaries, as well as for the expansion of democracy and human rights. It opened up new possibilities for trade, travel, and cultural exchange, as well as for new alliances and partnerships. The Cold War had been a long and bitter struggle, but the fall of the Berlin Wall finally brought it to an end and opened up new opportunities for the world. Legacy and impact. The fall of the Berlin Wall had a profound legacy and impact on the world, inspiring people around the globe to fight for freedom and democracy. It represented a victory for the power of people to effect change and showed that the values of democracy and human rights can triumph over oppression and dictatorship. The legacy of the fall of the Berlin Wall can be seen in the ongoing struggles for democracy and human rights around the world, from the Arab Spring to the current pro-democracy movements in countries like Belarus and Myanmar. It also serves as a reminder of the importance of maintaining and protecting democratic institutions and the rule of law. The fall of the Berlin Wall has also had cultural and artistic impacts, inspiring works of literature, music, and film.